Well, needless to say, the U.S. is still grappling with the nuclear threats posed by North Korea and Iran.
But perhaps more frightening is, of course, the prospect that terrorists get their hands on such a weapon. The new documentary, Nuclear Tipping Point, is an attempt to underscore the threat. It's also a call to speed up efforts to secure so-called loose nukes, both here and abroad. One of the men featured in the film, co-chairman and CEO of the Nuclear Threat Initiative, former Senator Sam Nunn. Now, look, we know that this has been an issue the president actually talks a lot about. President Obama did it in a speech in Prague. He's done it numerous times. It was one of the ways during the campaign that he wanted to bolster his own foreign policy credentials. Why did you decide that you needed Hollywood to do this? Do you think the country's not taking it seriously enough?
Well, I never think we're taking it seriously enough, because it's, to me, the greatest threat we face, and it being not only the prospect of possibility of catastrophic terrorism, but also the proliferation of weapons to countries like Iran and North Korea. And those two are not two separate things. The more countries that have nuclear weapons, the more countries that enrich without appropriate supervision for fuel purposes, legitimate purposes, the more danger there is that terrorists could get their hands on a nuclear weapon, and they don't have a return address and they don't mind dying. So this is a threat, and it's going to be a continuing threat. So we can never do enough, but President Obama has led out on this in a very visible way, and it's terrific that the President of Russia has also endorsed what we call the vision and steps, and it's also terrific that the United Nations Security Council has done that. Now the job's turning words into deeds, and that's a big step.
So you're a committed Cold Warrior, as are your cohorts on this film, Schultz, Kissinger, I think William Perry. But explain to folks why, for the U.S. and Russia to reduce its own nuclear arsenal, that will have an effect on whether terrorists can get a hold of these nuclear weapons. Some people won't necessarily see that connection, and they think, hey, if that's a possibility, shouldn't we even more keep our nuclear weapons and keep our nuclear arsenals strong?
Well, the threat has fundamentally changed from the Cold War, and that's one of the powerful messages of this film, and that's one of the reasons we want to keep talking about it in a very visible way, because we're not in a Cold War type danger situation with the former Soviet Union or Russia. We have much more in common, we being the nuclear powers, including Russia and including China, even though we have many differences. We have much more in common in terms of the changed threat, and the changed threat is one of proliferation and one of catastrophic terrorism. So we have to have cooperation. We have to take a number of steps to protect America. Those steps require cooperation. You're not going to get cooperation from countries that must cooperate, not just the nuclear powers, but many others, unless they see that you're heading in a direction called for in the Non-Proliferation Treaty, and that is step-by-step approach to, at some point in the future, ultimately getting rid of nuclear weapons. So the steps and the vision go together. You cannot have the steps without cooperation. You cannot get cooperation without that long-range vision.
Before we let you go, the President, in his State of the Union, talked about getting Don't Ask, Don't Tell repealed. You were very involved in the initial policy creating this. What's your view still on this policy? Do you believe it's something that was right then still, right now, or where are you on this policy?
Chuck, the policy changed back in the early 1990s. At that point in time, I think it's important to realize gays and lesbians had to lie to get in the military. They no longer have to lie. I'm grateful to every man and woman who serves in the military, including gays and lesbians. The President now says we should repeal that policy. When you repeal it, you have to do several things. You have to, first of all, have hearings in the Congress, which they're going to do. You have to hear from the military, not just the top. Certainly Gates and Admiral Mullen are important, and they've done work on this, but you have to also hear from the enlisted personnel. And you have to make sure you're going to be able to maintain unit cohesion while we have two wars going on, and you have to be fair in terms of the regulations if you're going to change the policy. Fair not only to gays and lesbians, but also to all the men and women who serve.
Sounds like you're not...
Before we go, do you support repeal?
I would have to listen to all the, I'd have to take all the steps that I've just outlined, plus a few more, to be able to finally decide.
So you're not convinced?
This is not a policy that should be locked in forever. But when we change it, we have to make sure we do it right. You have to be willing to work on heterosexual rules as well as the rules that relate to gays and lesbians. This is not a very easy task. It's going to take a lot of care.
Quickly, where will we see this documentary? Where are we going to be able to see it?
You can get it from nucleartippingpoint.com. We're encouraging people to order them, and they're free. And you can also go on Facebook, and it links you into all of this if you look up Facebook, nti.org.
Okay.
All right.
Senator Sam Nunn.
A worthy project. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.